So there you are. You got suckered into playing Warcraft. All your friends play. They've been playing for years. You know, maybe your kids play. Maybe you're a parent and you're playing with your son or daughter for the first time, and you kind of do like it. It is kind of fun. Video games are kind of cool. But you look over at your friends or your family or whoever, and you go, "Wow, they look so amazing." And here I am, this whatever you're playing as, and you just don't feel like you look really cool. You look over at their glowing weapons and their shining, polished armor, and you're just envious. And you just want to know, how do you get that stuff? How do you get, maybe not that stuff, but stuff that's cool? Well, today I'm going to show you ways you can put in just time. Not that these things are super difficult, they just take some time. Things you can do to look cool. So, when we refer to the way things look in this game, we call it transmog. So, the first thing to know about transmog is there's two common ways every player accesses the transmog system. The most common way, especially if you're playing with some high-level friends, is they might have a yak. The yak, they click the transmogrifier guy, who's an NPC that just happens to also ride them out with you. You click it and you get a screen that looks something like this. Maybe a little smaller. I have an add-on that makes a couple changes, but it looks generally like this, where you click the slots, you see the appearances, you see sets showing up. You might have even seen that you can make outfits, you can save specific outfit appearances. But you look at this, you might not even have many boxes. Hell, you might not even have a page. It might just be 3 things and that's it, as far as items go. So you got the yak as way 1, and then way 2, for your Horde players I can show you, for your Alliance players I can just tell you that it exists somewhere there in Stormwind, and the other big cities I'm sure too. In Orgrimmar, I'm in the drag. I'm even kind of put a pin roughly where I'm at. So in Orgrimmar, you got the Warchief hut thingy over here. You go between the two up the auction house, and you go into the drag, and here we are at this building with this little lightning stuff and a mailbox by it. And there's an ethereal man named Warpweaver Dashar, who's a transmog person, who does the same exact thing as that yak. So, when you come to him, you can transmog your stuff. So, cool, now you know how to transmog, but how do you look cool? How do I get those things to turn items into? So, that's the second part of this video now. So, what you want to do is you want to click on your micro menu, which I've made huge for this video, just so I can show you the button and clicking easily. You're going to look through a couple screens. You're going to look through the collection screen. You're going to also use your adventure guide at some point. So, the collection screen. If I click at the collection screen and I go to appearances, I can see 2 tabs at the top, kind of like the transmog thing itself. I can see the items I have, and they are filtered by their category of what item type they are. Some items don't have transmogs. You can't see your trinkets, you can't see your rings, and you can't see your necklaces. And on some characters, you really don't necessarily have the ability to see your boots, but they do include boots in some weird ways, like this. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but it exists, I guess. So anyways, when you're looking through these screens, you can find stuff you like. But the way I suggest a new player to get started is to not allow yourself to feel overwhelmed by the not collected tab and go, wow, I've got 28 pages of stuff for just boots that I don't have. Let's start somewhere simpler. First place to start for a new player, just learning about their class and learning about the iconic stuff. What makes you look cool? What do people think of when they think of how your character looks? They start with sets. So open your set tab if you're following along, and scroll to the very bottom. And then you kind of click set by set, and you kind of see what people think of. I typically would say start at the very bottom and work your way up, but if you want to jump right with me, I'm going to turn off PvP, and I'm going to show you a particular one from a particular raid. So let's look at 2. Crystal Forge armor on a Paladin. So on your character, whatever class you're playing as, find something that says Serpent Shrine Cavern towards the bottom of your list. And then, when you look at each item that it displays in the right-hand panel, you see names of items, and you can kind of tell what part they go on, because they usually have words that describe the location, like face guard. Sometimes it's a helmet, sometimes it's a war helm, but it's some that means your head, and so on and so forth. So the thing we're going to look at is the source. Oftentimes under sets, there will be one directly listed source, but sometimes there's a hidden way to get it too. Not that it's a secret extra way, but it's kind of like vendor, comma, token that you're going to get from a raid that you turn right into the item in the raid. So this particular set has 7 parts that compose of it. If I go one by one to look, I see vendor, 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 profession boss drop, vendor, and profession boss drop. Oh, profession world drop, I'm sorry. So 2 of these items can come from professions, 5 of them come from vendors, and 1 is also a world drop, one of the ones that comes from professions. So usually for the oldest stuff you'd focus on vendors. So Crystal Forge armor. We're going to open up our adventure guide now. We're going to see what is that place. So go to the adventure guide, open the raid tab, and you're going to go expansion by expansion for the armor you've chosen. And we're going to stop in Burning Crusade because we already know where it's at. We're going to look for Serpentine Cavern, and we're going to go from there. So when I open it up, and I click the top left usually, just out of habit, I see the stuff that comes from the whole raid. What I typically look for when I'm looking for transmog sets is I look for things that are very generic sounding, and when I look at them, it talks about creating a class set item appropriate for my loot spec. I look for that description on items that are very generic sounding, and they follow the naming pattern of item of the adjective, and then like hero or champion or crusader, like things like that. These are what we call tokens. Some tokens you could bring to the vendor, wherever the vendor is, and you hand them the thing. So it might just be something as simple as an item I've pre-grabbed for this video. It might be something as simple as like, wow, a Conqueror's Mark of Sanctification. What do I do with that? You'll get stuff like this, and you bring it to a vendor, and you sometimes even include a piece of armor that is related to it, and you hand it to the vendor, and they give you an appearance. Some tokens in some raids, they'll drop, and right there in the freaking raid, you right-click the item in your bag, and boom, these gloves will turn into the Crystal Forged armor. And it'll be one of the specs appearances, which are usually almost completely identical. So, back to what we're saying here specifically. Serpentine Cavern. I want that Crystal Forged armor. Do I see all the tokens here? I see 1, I see 2, I see 3. Then I can scroll down and go, do I see any of the others? I'll cut to the chase. No, I only see 3. You can go boss by boss as well. You can go, okay, this guy drops the gloves, Lady Vosh drops the helm, one of these other guys drops something else, but I only counted 3. And SnackGuides, you said 5 items. Where's the other 2? Well, let me show you. You go back in the collection thing. You get back to the armor. You go armor, 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 vendor, 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 and you'll find something else. Like one of these items will give you another hint. So here's what you want to do: mouse over them, and the ones that don't say vendor, that say profession or boss drop, try to find the boss drop. Most of the sets came from 2 raids, especially in the oldest content. So if you find the boss drop, that's the hint for the other raid to go to. So if I'm tabbing and I find that the Girdle of the Righteous Path version of the belt comes from some guy, High Astromancer Solarian, in the Eye. The Eye. That sounds like a word I saw a second ago. Raids. We'll go back to home. We'll go to the Eye. Okay, let's look in here. Oh, right there at the very top. Chest guard and pauldrons of the Vanquished Champion. Everything was of the Vanquished Champion, and there's your last 2 pieces. So from here, you go, okay, cool, I know where they're at. I know this Serpentine Cavern place and this Eyeball place drop a good chunk of that set. Well, where is it? Well, Google it. Or if you know it's from an expansion, you try to find the continent that's associated with it. So we know that Burning Crusade is Outland. So I'm gonna go to Outland, and if I had no idea, I would click each zone and I look for it, and without any add-ons, you just probably won't necessarily find it. Check a Wowhead, but Serpentine Cavern is, you would go to Zenger Marsh, and you'd go to this lake, and you'd swim down this tube, and then there's 4 dungeon entrances in this base, and you go to the big one, and it should say Serpentine Cavern when you check your map when you're in the raid, and there you go, you run it and you win. Netherstorm is where the Eye is at. The Eye is part of the Tempest Keep. So you'd go to those 2 places, and you'd run those dungeons, or those raids, by yourself, and you would hopefully get those items over a couple weeks. So, something to note about running old raids for gear. So this is the second part. This is the third part. This is kind of like the addendum to the other parts. So when you click your character, your wherever it is, however it looks, if you have an add-on or not, you should be able to click your unit plate for your own name, and you should get a little menu. One of those little menu things to check is the raid difficulty, and even the dungeon difficulty for items that come from dungeons. So I can set my raid difficulty to some value. Typically, a dungeon or a raid that has multiple difficulties, when you're at the portal for the place, the appearance of the portal will appear different depending on the difficulty, to confirm to you before you go into it that you are actually set on the difficulty you want. So let me give you a little example. So if I come up to a portal for an instance, which is a dungeon or a raid, and I click myself, and I set this dungeon difficulty to something, it'll say dungeon difficulty set to normal in my chat. I set it to heroic. If this dungeon was able to be heroic, it would have a particular shape and color of a skull, and then if I can set it to mythic, it could change again. And I forget at the moment if the legacy stuff affects the 10 or 25, but I think there's a ways you can tell from that, and then your calendar would also show a thing in the dungeon. You know, who cares? Why does this matter? Well, if we go back to our collections, we look at some of the newer ones. Say Tomb of Sargeras. Find Tomb of Sargeras with whatever class you're looking at, and find the armor that comes from the Tomb of Sargeras. There's a drop-down box, and you have different colors, different looks. Like, oh my god, this looks amazing for a paladin. This is really, really wicked looking. It comes from Mythic. You would want to come to that dungeon, and you'd want to set it to Mythic. Make sure that right skull shows up. And when you kill the stuff in there, so if I go to this first boss, or one of the bosses first, say this helmet, this crown, you wear a crown on your head, so it's the helmet. Demonic Inquisition. So if I go to the guide again, and then I go to, I know it's in Legions, I'm just showing you, Tomb of Sargeras, and find the Demonic Inquisition boss where the crown drops, I can then also see different versions of that fight and find the gear that drops. And you say, well, nothing seems to change here. Well, if I look in the item and I go like this, make my character naked with my add-on, Leatrix Maps, by the way. If I put on, where did it go? I put on the Radiant Crown, that's the Raid Finder version. That's the normal, heroic, mythic, and I'm control left clicking these to make the appearance show up. So you might say, okay, normal, heroic, and mythic. How to do Raid Finder? Usually in the major city for the expansion that the raid is in, there's a guy somewhere that stands there with these speech bubbles. You got to look it up how to find it, but you find him and you tell him, I want to go back in time and see this, and that's how you run looking for raid versions of those dungeons for the Raid Finder versions of the appearances. But that video that we've just made here covers a good chunk of a wider variety of topics. If you have any questions, if you're my parents, you can ask me directly. If you're the general public, ask in the comments. I'm sure someone will help. Maybe me, maybe you'll help another person watching. Alright, thanks for watching. Have a great day.